It was getting dark as we drove back to Mosquito's house. Roger and his friend were headbanging in front of the Firebird to a song about a boy named Ricky that had a drinking problem and I guess did some bad things because the song went on about him doing time. I sat in the back window overseeing a sloshing milk jug full of holy water. Roger had put a seatbelt over it. Roger's driving made me wish I had a seatbelt too. The song about Ricky ended with a lot of wailing of people on guitars. Skeeter rolled down his window and stuck his head out, howling like a wolf. Roger kept his eyes on the road, I assume because it was getting hard to see and we were now carrying precious cargo. Skeeter reeled his head back inside and propped his feet up on the dashboard. "Man, I can't believe you torched my uncle's car," he laughed. "How did we even get away with that? We should have a fleet of pigs chasing us." I looked out the back window, half expecting to see some rusty old red pickup trucks tailing us with large whiskered pig people at the wheels, steering with their hooves. The thought made me shiver. Roger was driving like a bat out of hell, as my mom used to say. And if any piggies were running after us, there was no way they could keep up. "Let's just say I got a guardian angel watching over me," said Roger. Skeeter shook his head. "Whatever, dude, as long as your eye in the sky has got me covered as well." He glanced at Roger like he was expecting an answer, but when none came, he shrugged and went back to headbanging. We pulled up in front of Skeeter's house to the sound of barking and the rattling of something metal. A yellow doggy stood on the front porch chained to one of those posts and barking at the car. Skeeter leaned out his window and yelled at it to shut up, which it quickly did. "Remember, Skeet," Roger said, holding up his hand in a partially clenched fist. "I was never here." Mosquito grabbed Roger's hand and squeezed it hard. "Roger Madwhip?" he smirked. "That guy's dead and buried." Then he climbed out the window, not bothering to open the car door. When he was halfway across the yard, Roger suddenly leaned out the shattered driver's side window to call after him. "Skeeter!" he shouted. Skeeter stopped and turned, eyebrows raised expectantly. Roger hesitated. "What?" asked Skeeter, shrugging his shoulders. Roger stuttered. "Be good." Skeeter laughed. The dog barked at him and he flapped his hand at it before looking back. "I'll see you on the other side, brother." He turned back to his house where an elderly-looking lady in a big flowery dress and hairnet was peering through the screen door. "Not likely, brother," Roger said under his breath. There was a hint of sadness in his voice. He watched quietly as Skeeter jumped the steps up onto the porch and waved to the woman watching from inside. She shuffled out of sight and Skeeter shrugged, petted the yellow dog, and went in and disappeared as well. Roger stared off into space for another minute after his friend was gone. I cleared my throat to try and get his attention. He glanced at me in the rearview mirror and then sighed. "You ready to exercise, kitty cat?" "I can't run very fast," I told him. "But I don't get tired, at least." He started backing out of the driveway. "No, dip bleep. X or size. We're gonna go banish a demon or two back to the pit." "Oh, okay. Can I come sit in the front seat?" "Yeah, whatever. Just don't draw attention to yourself by looking out the window or setting anything else on fire." He still had no idea I couldn't burn things. Wherever that angel helper guy Nathaniel was, I hoped he was keeping track of us just in case. When we'd set fire to that car earlier, it scared me because we were so close to the church where people could get hurt, but as we had been running back to the Firebird, I had looked back and it seemed like the flames were curling in on themselves, keeping the blaze limited to just the car, almost like they were alive. I think Nathaniel did that. "So where to now?" I asked. "Is Lily back at the lake's house yet?" Roger stared into the darkness. "No, she's somewhere else right now." "How do you know?" "Because I have this." He sat up and jammed his hand into his pants pocket, fumbled around for a minute like whatever he was trying to get out was stuck, and then pulled out his hand to show me he was sticking up his middle finger. I squinted at him. "You're not very nice." "Take it easy, it was just a joke." I think that was his way of saying he was sorry. At least that's what I decided. "The truth is, my sister and I have a connection." I knew what he meant. I felt a connection to you, Lily. since the day you let me sit with you in the cafeteria and I shared my cookies with you. An unbreakable bond of friendship like I'd never felt before. I don't know what it was. Just something inside me that said, stick with this girl because she'll change your life. I guess in hindsight that feeling was a bit misleading, but I can't deny my life has definitely changed.
It's not like that,
Roger snapped. Like what? I'd been lost in thought and wasn't paying attention.
Like whatever you were thinking just now. I don't know what it was, but I know it was weird. I'm talking about something else. You ever see Star Wars?
Oh, sure. I like the Ewoks. I used to dream about having a giant treehouse village just like them. One big maze of bridges and tree houses.
Right. You remember how the Empire put like a tracking device in the Millennium Falcon so they could follow it to the Rebel base on Yavin 4?
I had no idea what he was talking about, but I just wanted to say, oh my gosh, Lily, your brother is a Star Wars nerd. There was a long, uncomfortable silence.
Look, anyway, I got something like that. I can find my sister wherever she goes.
After another couple songs about screaming and how awesome rock and roll is, we got back into the city part of the city. We drove past the library and City Hall. There was a light on in one of the offices, and I wondered who was working late. Maybe it was one of the janitorial people? I don't know. I just wonder whenever I see a light in an office building late at night, what it would be like to be in that dark office with just my one room lit, doing who knows what until after midnight. My dad had an office job, but he was always home by dinner time. I wonder where my dad would be right now if he hadn't died because of me. Well, the buildings we passed got older looking. Lots of brick. We passed one that looked like an old abandoned firehouse. It had big arches in the side like you drive a fire engine through, but they had been bricked up. The building next to it was gutted and torched. I wondered for a moment if the old firehouse had been shut down after they failed to put out a fire next door. We turned the corner around the side of the burnt-out building slowly. Roger seemed to be looking at it like it might be where you were. I wanted to ask, but around the corner everything got lit up with red and blue lights. Roger immediately pulled over to the curb and flipped off the headlights. "Is this where Lily is?" I asked. I crawled up to the dashboard to see what was happening. It wasn't easy, what with my little soft paw appendages, but I found that I could get up there by sheer determination. There was some sort of police barricade with emergency vehicles on the other side of it, and people in different types of uniforms were going in and out of the building and talking to each other over radios. It looked like a crime scene. "Get down!" Roger hissed, swatting at me with his hand. I scurried back down off the dashboard, but got up on the little edge of the door where the window roller downer thingy was so I could peek. "Oh gosh, I hope Lily's okay," I whispered.
"She's not here,"
Roger said, scanning the area like some sort of Lily-detecting robot sonar.
"But she was."
He gestured toward all the emergency people wandering around the area.
As evidenced by the fact that another someone's probably dead in all this mess.
"Lily's not a killer!" Roger turned, glaring, and shook his finger in my face.
"That's exactly what she is. A killer! Why do you think the idiots running the show gave her their gift of visions?"
I slid back down into my seat. "Because she's used them for good, to help people."
Wrong! They don't reward you for saving lives up there, wherever there is.
He stared back out the blue and red flashing lights with dead eyes.
Souls living and dying aren't important. They want little soldiers, trained to use their gifts to follow orders and make sure that their precious word is followed.
I didn't like the way he was talking. "I know you're not a bad person, Lily. No more than I am." "How would you know?" I spat. He looked down at me and I could see something shiny running down his cheek.
"Because mine was first,"
he said quietly, his voice cracking. Roger wiped at his eyes and then looked back out at the scene going on just down the sidewalk. Suddenly, he clenched his jaw and whispered loudly, "Oh, bleep!" and ducked down low in the driver's seat. "What?" I asked. "What is it?" I climbed back up onto the car door window ledge to peek over the dashboard. There was a figure standing outside the police tape, bathed in the red and blue lights. He wore a big trench coat that went all the way down to his knees. I couldn't make out his face because the light was behind him, but it seemed clear. He was turned in our direction. The man reached into his coat pocket and fumbled with something that he put up to his face with both hands. After a moment, I saw a small flame from a lighter as he lit a cigarette. Those things are bad for you, you know. They cause cancer. So does the sun, though. Can't keep people from getting sun. I recognized him in the brief moment when the small flame lit up his face. I had seen him that morning, Lily, when he pulled up in his car and stopped you and asked you questions, and you told him about me and this stuffed cat doll. I thought it was crazy of you to tell him, but he seemed to just not care at all. Like he was used to that sort of weirdness happening. The man in the trench coat gestured towards someone else, and a man in a police uniform came over and they started talking. The trench coat wearing man pointed toward us with his hand with a cigarette in it. The police officer man nodded, looked in our direction, and then pulled a walkie-talkie off his belt and started talking to it.
"We need to get out of here,"
Roger whispered loudly. I don't know how else to describe it, but it was a loud whisper. I know that seemed contradictory, but it was clearly a whisper, yet clearly not a whisper. I watched as the policeman walked around the barricades and started coming in our direction. With his free hand, he pulled another something off his belt and toyed with it until it turned on, casting light. Oh, it was a flashlight. The car revved to life as Roger turned the key. He grabbed the sticky thingy between the seats and cranked it around, which made this nasty grinding sound. When he stepped on the gas pedal, the car started going backward. The police officer's walk turned into a jog.
"Hey!"
he yelled.
"Stop right there!"
"Bleep
that!"
said Roger, sliding up in his seat and stepping on the gas. The Firebird's wheels screeched on the pavement. Over a dozen heads turned to look our way. The man in the trench coat stood there watching us squeal away. His policeman friend broke into a run as we flew around the corner of the building backward. We hit the curb and the car bounced violently. I suddenly felt the ground disappear from underneath me. I was flying, cartwheeling into the back of the vehicle. Up it came down, and then up again and down again. Somehow, this didn't make me feel completely dizzy. Normally, I can't even ride the teacups at Disney World without needing a barf bag. I guess being a ghost in a stuffed cat toy has its perks. Roger was looking back over his shoulder, probably to make sure he didn't run over anybody. I flew by him for a second before bouncing off a window.
"Hold on to that jug!"
he yelled. "Do I look like I'm on top of things?" I shouted back, then I landed on the floor and got wedged under the front seat. There was a ballpoint pen and some wrapped mints in a tiny cardboard tube that had 50-cent pennies written on it underneath the seat with me. "Oh hey, I found some pennies!" I called out. The car lurched and the penny roll hit me in the face. It didn't hurt.
"Grab the jug, numbnuts!"
Roger sounded frantic.
"If we spill that, we're bleeped!"
I started to crawl out from under the seat when the car seemed to go into a spin. Roger had both hands on the steering wheel and was gripping it like he was trying to choke it to death.
"Oh, come on, baby,"
he hissed. There was no flashing red or blue lights coming up through the windows, just darkness outside and the occasional sound of a car going by. I climbed up onto the back seat where the jug of holy water was still safely strapped but tipped over. The plastic lid was off and water was gagooshing out onto the seat. I squeaked and fumbled with picking up the lid, but my stupid fingerless paws couldn't grab it.
"What's going on back there?"
Roger shouted. "Everything's okay," I said, trying to hide the desperation in my voice. I hooked a soft limb around the handle and pulled the water jug back upright. It was only half full now. The seat was totally soaked and there was a puddle in the center of it. The little plastic lid was floating on top of the water. I reached for it again just as Roger made a sharp turn. Thankfully, the jug didn't spill again, but I fell in the puddle. I tried to push myself up, but my body felt heavier. The stuffing was soaking up the water like a sponge. It was a weird sensation. The Firebird slowed and came to a stop. Roger turned around in the seat and saw me laying in the puddle.
"Son of a bleep!"
he snapped, clenching his fists. He paused and closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. "I'm sorry," I told him. "I saved as much as I could. It fell over when we bounced, I think." I heard Roger count to 10 slowly, quietly, and then open his eyes again and breathe out.
"It's not your fault.
He sounded strangely calm. It actually made me more scared than when he was shouting.
I should have come up with a better way to store it. And been more careful when I was getting away from the pigs back there. And
he squinted at the jug.
There's still a half gallon left from the looks of it. That should be enough.
But how do we get past all the piggies? I asked, rolling off the seat onto the floor and then dragging my soggy butt up into the front with a squishy plop. And where are we? We were parked by a big, rushing river. Cars were driving past us constantly, but none of them had red and blue flashy lights. The water was dark, but I could see the moon reflecting off it.
We're down by the river.
Roger climbed out the window of the car and stretched. He walked around to the back and started to open the car door before cursing and slamming it shut. He muttered to himself as he came back around and climbed back in the window. He stopped for a minute to sigh, then pressed the cigarette lighter in before shimmying into the back seat to put the lid back on the jug, undo the seatbelt, hook it through the jug's handle, and fasten it back into place. "What river is this?" I asked. "What are we going to do about Lily?" Your brother slouched down in the back seat and put his arm around the jug of water like it was his new girlfriend. He pulled out his pack of cigarettes, tapped one out, and then sat there for a bit staring off into space. A moment later, the cigarette lighter popped out and he climbed back into the front seat, lit his cigarette, and looked out the broken window at the passing cars.
I told you she wasn't back there. We're still on her trail. She seems to be heading east.
He finally said. "Well, what are we waiting for? I wanted to fat little wet fists, but I can't actually make fists. Let's get going!"
Pick a song.
He turned on the radio and twisted the dial for a bit until I heard a song about rain that I recognized from my parents' collection. I think the band's name is CCR. I like this one. Roger took a deep drag on a cigarette, then flicked it out the window and ground the gear stick until he seemed satisfied.
Fine, but I get the next pick.
That's fair. I wanted to smile, but since I couldn't, I hoped I sounded happy enough to make it sound obvious I was thinking about smiles.
And I wonder, still I wonder.
He sang along as we merged with the rest of the cars. We drove for another 20 minutes or so. I don't know time that well, but it was like 5 or 6 songs. I kinda lost count. Let's just say it was about 20 minutes, okay? Anyway, we were listening to some group called Def Leopards when we pulled into a familiar place. Guess where we ended up, Lily? You remember the nasty motel me and the Lake stayed at after I burned their house down a couple years back? It was that one. The Red Moon Hotel. We sat there in the parking lot for a good 5 minutes. I didn't say anything because I was having flashbacks to the time I stayed here. I don't fully remember everything, just you coming to visit, and I think someone came and attacked me and you stopped them. It's all just little bits of a broken mirror in my head.
She's here,
Roger whispered. I could feel my fake cat fur standing on end. Are her foster parents here too? I asked, not sure why we were whispering.
I can't tell.
He said, still in a hushed tone.
I can only tell that Lily's here, which means the demon's here too. We gotta be quick about this. We surprise it before it has a chance to do anything.
He leaned into the back seat and grabbed the jug of water, then shimmied out of the broken window and took the jug with him. I shrugged, sloshing a bit to get across the car and climb up the side of the door and out the window. My stuffed body was cold and damp from the night wind that had been blowing in the whole drive. I felt like I was made out of a slushie. When I finally hit the pavement with a wet little splat, I found Roger standing there frozen with the jug in one hand and a frown on his face. I squished over and grabbed onto his ankle in the hope that maybe he could carry me faster than I could run. "What's wrong?" I whispered. He stared off into the cars in the parking lot.
Someone's over there.
"Who is it?" I asked. I couldn't see anything from way down by the ground. Roger moved slowly, cautiously through the cars. I pulled myself slowly up his pant leg until I could hook my paw through one of the belt loops. It wasn't a great position, but I didn't want to go higher up and get stuck in his stinky armpit or something. Headlights from a passing semi on the side street cut through the cars in the lot. I saw ahead of us the silhouette of a person in one of the car windows. Roger saw it too and froze. We only saw them for a few seconds and then everything was dark again. Roger crept closer. Eventually, we could make out the person's shape without a passing car's headlights helping. Roger ducked low, making it impossible for me to see again. He shuffled a few steps and then stood up fast. "Oh, bleep," he muttered. There was a middle-aged man in the car. He had a gray mustache and he looked like he hadn't shaved in a few days. He was staring straight ahead, but his face was pressed up against the window like he was asleep. He looked to be drooling a little, but the drool was dark-colored and staining the collar of his shirt. "Is he dead?" I whispered. "Who is he?"
I have no idea.
Roger turned and looked at the row of dimly lit hotel rooms.
This is bad.
Before I could say anything else, he dashed through the cars in the direction of the numbered rooms. He gripped the water jug tightly. I gripped his belt loop less tightly. Just before he reached the door of room 36, I fell off and landed on the pavement. Roger didn't seem to notice or care. He reached the door, leaned back, and gave it a solid kick. The door swung open with a splintering crash. Inside was a dark hallway lit by those stick thingies, torches. The hall seemed to go on into the building much further than I thought was possible. There were all these other doors. It looked a lot like the place you took me to before I died. The place where we met the angels and all those weird people. Roger cursed loudly, reached into the hall, grabbed the door, and slammed it shut. It didn't look like it wanted to stay shut, though. It creaked slightly ajar. I could still make out the flickering torchlights. Roger slammed it shut again and twisted on the knob.
Can't leave that open. I can't leave that open.
He started muttering to himself.
Give me a rock. Where's a rock?
I got up and looked around. My eyesight was kind of blurry and everything was so huge. I didn't think I was making a very good sidekick. I don't know, I squeaked. Roger looked at the window next to the door. I couldn't see inside because the shades were drawn. Bleep it, he said, setting down the jug of water. He took several steps back and then sprinted forward, throwing himself through the window sideways. The glass shattered in large chunks and came crashing down both inside and outside the room. He didn't yell or anything, but it looked like it hurt. I probably would have cried, personally. The lights came on in one of the adjoining rooms, and someone called out, "What's going on out there?" "Nothing," I yelled. "Go back to sleep." I could hear Roger cursing and crunching on broken glass inside the hotel room. Was he going to drag Lily out the window? How are we supposed to use the jug of holy water on her if she was in there and it was out here? A baby started crying somewhere. Several doors down, a couple of heads peeked out and looked around before going back inside. One guy came out in a big white bathrobe. I don't think he saw the broken window because he seemed to look more toward the cars in the parking lot. Roger came flopping back over the windowsill alone and tumbled back out onto the sidewalk just seconds after the man in the bathrobe turned and went back into his room. Whew! There was a big gash on the side of Roger's face, and it looked like he had this weird black smoke leaking out of it. He lay there on the sidewalk and stared up at the stars.
You've lost her,
he whispered. What do you mean? I panicked, imagining you lying dead inside. I wanted more than anything to be able to run into the hotel room and find you waiting, sitting on the bed with a great big smile on your face. I know that sounds weird since you don't really smile very often. We'd given each other a big hug and everything would be all right. But the door was broken into some sort of alternate reality, and I couldn't get into the window. Your brother just lay there, a thin trail of black smoke leaking out of his cheek, and held up this shiny Pokemon card. It was the one you'd found that morning when we were looking through things in the remains of your old house.
She's not here,
he said, turning the Pokemon card over and over in his hand.
And I can't track her anymore. Not without this.
He looked like he wanted to crush the card. His hand trembled, but instead he stuffed it in his pants pocket and rolled over on his side, looked at me, then licked his finger and rubbed at the smoky gash on his face.
We're bleeped.
Hey there kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta, and I want to tell you thanks so much for watching tonight's video or listening to tonight's episode of the podcast if you happen to be listening to this as a podcast, or as a YouTube, or however else you managed to have found this story for tonight. And as always, I would love to give a big thank you to everyone who's supporting me over on Patreon. You guys are the real MVPs, you guys keep things going, especially while things have been nuts for me over the past couple of months. And things have been getting crazier and crazier as time goes on. You guys are the ones who are keeping me sane. And I mean that with all sincerity, that you guys have helped me immensely. So, in my personal life and my professional life, I want to give a very big thank you to Jordan Alexander Sanchez, Jakob Fenske, Burnett, Kraus, LaQueda, Canizales, MrCreepyPasta, PebisPleaser, Catus, Joseph Calarrudo, BuddhaBee, Dante, Kinkade, Foxhound 803, Mephistopheles, CursepoxPrimarch, Bastion, Beefcake, Jeff the Cultist, Love You M&M, INSANITYGamerX, Jesus Cornejo, Yarghoul, Clark, kearns, himbojerry, SamaHigh, CrusaderChocobo, Adamarius, Captain Scurvy, Espadine, Braden Morris, Nate Cull, Our Min Sect Time, Angelus, Seclude, That Creepy Chick, Red Shadow Cat, Xavier and Cheyenne, 6 Gay Rats in a Trench Coat, Turtleman, Cryolinium, Lord Life's Best, Gorang Trimagacy, Mr. Marcus Blitz, Ika Limchok, Dirt Diver 030, Matt Bach, Voice of Sand, Shelly J, Fikamel, Deleted Account, Melted Lake, Tully Sue, William King, Sashi Suzaku, Stricken, Freddy Krueger, Happy Birthday Jason Wilson, Lisa Cottrell, Caspian, Hades Nephew, Tater Chip, Acid System, Mog, Kiwi the Sloth, Fester's Lampshade, Nico Kaya, The Ginger Bros, and Stormcrow, Daniel Paulson, and Corey Kenshin. To everyone on this list, everyone in the description, and of course anyone who could support even just $1, thank you all so much for making my life significantly easier with this. And if you guys would like to be able to join any of the names that you see here or down there or anything at all, head over to patreon.com/MrCreepyPasta. And with that, I wish you all a very, very pleasant night and sweet dreams.